hours. And that makes this 24-hour Valo Fest really timely. And over the last, 23 hours, since we haven't finished mine yet, you've seen a lot of stuff. So you've seen what the products and tools are capable of, and obviously that's changing rapidly and delivering a lot of value into the Office 365 or a Microsoft 365 landscape. By the way, I'm sticking with Office 365 for the moment. I've trained myself too hard in doing that. In a couple of months, I'll switch over to Microsoft 365, but we all know what I'm talking about. You've seen a bunch of great case studies, including the one just before this session from Murdoch University, and they've really showed the challenges that folks have had, how they've gone about it, the lessons learned. And there's been a lot of inspirational speakers looking at how we work as individuals, the work-life balance, how we address knowledge management and the like. So where do I fit into all of this? And where does this session fit in? Well, by recognizing a challenge. And the challenge is this, that even as we're delivering enormous amounts of new functionality into landscapes, into organizations where we're delivering new tools and capabilities streets ahead of everything that we've had before. But alongside that, and as a direct consequence of that, we're introducing complexity. The tool set that people have to use now is harder than a year, 2 years, 5 years ago. Better, more functional, but more complex. And this recognises that actually the complexity is not just within Office 365, although to be sure there's plenty in Office 365, but that complexity is beyond this, because this is not the only thing that's changing. So alongside this is ServiceNow, is Workday, is new versions of Oracle and SAP. We're also seeing organisations add collaboration tools in, not replace. So we're seeing plenty of organisations that are using Jira and Confluence, Office 365 with its multiple collaboration tools, and Workplace by Facebook, not to mention Slack. So this is a real challenge for organisations, but it's particularly a challenge for individuals, because what we are expecting them to do is to work in new ways. I mean, this is the pitch, right? Is that we are going to transform our daily working lives to be more productive. But by definition, that means that what we would like people to be doing is not what they were doing before. And so there's a huge learning curve around this technology transformation. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And not the problems per se, but maybe some of the solutions. Because I guess my job in this session, and I guess out in the broader, wider world, is to create models and frameworks that make sense of the digital landscape within organisations. And to really emphasise something, in the work that I do and the rest of my team does, we don't get to theorise. We're not employed by clients to come up with conceptual models for anything. Our job is always to see what organisations are doing, to learn best practices, to identify methodologies that are actually going to help teams succeed. And so what I really want to do in this session is not expand your brain that will already be tired from the however many hours you've managed to see of the last 23 hours. So my goal is not to make your brain explode with complex models or detailed, intricate approaches. Instead, what I'm looking to do is to really put a wrapper around what you've learned so that you can fit the pieces together and so that you can take them back into the workforce and put them into productive, immediate practice. So, hello, I'm James. This is me when I've had a haircut, which is clearly, obviously, not now, thanks COVID. I'm the founder of Step 2. It's actually been around as a business for 23 years. And over that time, we've really played one of the leadership roles in defining what intranets are and how they succeed. in delivering a lot of the methodologies that are used by teams all around the globe. But then as organisations have matured, of course, we've then moved into digital workplace, and now we're at the forefront of digital employee experience, a concept that is coming from us from Australia and is spreading throughout the rest of the world. And I'll be talking about all three of those concepts. I've written some books. These books, I'm just going to say it, these books are great, really good, because their covers are so cheerful, because they're so bright that when you have them in your office, they cheer you up each day, and they contain some useful stuff. We've also written a heap of white papers, and we have published the single largest repository of free intranet resources of any one organisation in the world. So go in and dip into that and make of that what you will. So if that's the history, let's talk about the story so far for Intranet. So we've been in this space from almost the beginning. Intranets existed probably about 5-6 years before I stepped into this space, and I've seen pretty much all of the 20 plus years following this. And what we've seen in the work that we do is that there are common patterns of intranet evolution that are useful to understand, and they kind of lead us into where we might want to be heading. Be warned, I'm going to get you to think a little about where you might currently be on these 6 stages of intranet evolution, although I won't be forcing you to blurt it out at this end of the day. So, in the beginning, the intranet is born. Someone somewhere has this great idea that says, hey, I think we should have an intranet for our organisation. And that's often quite a small thing. It might be targeted around particular needs. So it might be an HR intranet. It might be an IT intranet. It might be an intranet to support a call centre. But whatever it is, it's enough for an intranet to come into existence and then to grow. What is amazing is that there are still some organisations that don't yet have an intranet. We come across a couple every year, so they still exist. But the vast majority of organisations, 99%, have gone past that and in or through organic growth. Now, organic growth is where a lot more people get involved in the intranet. A lot more content is published. A lot more things are delivered out to staff. And this content is added and communicated based on really one of two justifications, because the person who is publishing the content thinks that someone somewhere will have some use for the content at some point, or for vanity reasons. Now, I'm going to say vanity reasons is only ever the 5 to 10%, so the vast majority of content is published with the best of intentions. But the nature of this phase is organic growth. So in the absence of an overall strategy, a plan, a direction or a scope, content is added in an ad hoc fashion. Now, very early on, I used the metaphor of coral. So if you think about coral, lots of different colours, patterns and directions, really pretty little fish swimming through it, great, right? That's organic growth. And almost immediately when I started using that metaphor, someone said, no, that's not my intranet. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, what is your intranet? Oh, my intranet hasn't grown like coral. My intranet has grown like a fungus. Right. And look, and that reflects the fact that the organic growth inevitably means that intranets struggle with common problems, and that is around content is poorly structured and hard to find. Content is often out of date, incomplete, not useful in its focus. Authoring and publishing processes ineffective. There is a poor or outdated technology platform. There's not an overall strategy. There's insufficient resources, lack of recognition and support from senior leaders. Oh, and by the way, search sucks. We take a breath. Okay, so then what comes next? Well, what comes next is the era of redesigns. And so this is where the individual, or hopefully by this point a team, comes in and says, oh my goodness, this is a mess. How do we get into this state? How do we move forward? Right, let's do a redesign. And this is where they look at the existing content and they look at what they think will make sense as a new structure. They shuffle around all the content. They maybe give the intranet a new name, maybe a naming competition. They might rebrand the intranet, might have a little character, it might be less blue. There's the launch campaigns with the branded mouse mats, the branded stress balls, my favourite, the brand of the intranet wrapped around a chocolate bar, the posters in the foyer and the back of toilet doors. And so this is where they go out into the organisation and says, look, it was a mess before. We have come up with a structure that we think will work for you. You're going to love it. And look, and for a little while, it looks fine. But fast forward 3, 4, 5 years, and actually it turns out that we're back to the same situation where actually the intranet has fallen into disrepair, where content is out of date again. And then actually when we talk or listen to users, they're telling us that they still can't find anything. Oh my goodness, I don't know what we did last time. Right, let's do another redesign. And this is why this is the era of repeated redesigns. And we see this happen, every 3, 4, 5 years. One of the important things to recognise is that one of the biggest triggers for a redesign is a change in technology platforms. And so we're seeing a lot of that at the moment when intranets are going from even SharePoint on-prem into SharePoint Modern. There is a forced redesign. Now, how do we make sure that this time we're not just going in a loop? Well, maybe we should make sure that the intranet we deliver actually works for people, that it is usable. And so this is where we introduce, as was mentioned in the last talk, right, experience design techniques. This is about common UX techniques around card sorting, tree testing, around usability testing, where we actually go and check with users that they can find what they're looking for. And this marks a new age of professionalism for most intranets. This is where there are generally better models around content management, where there might be the start of governance, there might be the start of intranet strategy, and things like better search engine and better solutions along those lines. And so a lot of work goes into this. And so we go out to the organisation saying, look, we've done this best practice way. We've followed James's book that has the dots on it called Designing Intranets. That's great. You're going to love it. And yet it's still not enough. Well, what does it take, right? What does it take to make this thing work? Well, it's about recognising that you can have an intranet that is entirely usable, but totally useless. And why is that? Well, we focused on restructuring the content, on redesigning the layout of pages to help people get access to the information. Well, actually, what information? Well, that'd be the information on the existing intranet, right? Okay, so where did that content come from? Well, that came from phase 2, right? The phase of organic growth, where content was published up with the best of reasons, but without a clear understanding of what was actually needed. So really, this is all about shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic so all of the colours are lined up and you still hit the iceberg. So once we recognise this is where we start to say, well, maybe intranets need to be useful. And this is where most organisations are at now. And this is where we go out into the organisation and we actually talk with staff, not about what they want on the intranet, but what they do in their working lives. And this is where we get a clear understanding of particularly what frontline staff need, what they need in the contact centre, what they need out in the field. And from that, we get now an understanding of not just what the intranet could do better, but what the intranet could do that it has never done before. And once we start to do that, then we head towards phase 6, and the title of my third book, essential. Intranets that are essential, integral to the day-to-day work of staff, and fundamental in supporting the core objectives of the organisation. And this is an aspirational phase for most organisations, but certainly one that you want to head to. Now, if I had you all in a room, I would get you to shout out which phase you are in. I'm not going to let you do that because it's the end of the Australian day, at least the beginning of the European day. Instead, I'll give you a chance to think about this, about where you sit in this, while I take a sip of water, and then I'm going to put forward where I'm guessing you sit. I'm guessing you sit in either between phases 3 and 4, or between phases 4 and 5. And that's fine. That's not a bad position to be in, but it says, where do we go next? But to understand that, we really need to be thinking about, well, where do intranets sit in the bigger picture? And so let's start with that. So I'm going to be talking about 3 things: modern intranets, digital workplaces, and then digital employee experience. So let me start with the beginning, modern intranets. So first off, I'm going to say this: hey, I am not afraid of the I word. I know it's daggy. It is not trendy. Microsoft can call it the intelligent intranet. Good. It's still not going to be sexy, but that's fine. It is something now that organisations of all shapes and sizes, including Microsoft, have recognised that you need an intranet. It's not going away. It isn't dead, that is said every 5 years. But it is time to think about what role it plays within the organisation. And this is where we see that modern intranets play 2 fundamental roles. So firstly, they deliver key services, capabilities and content, in part just the way they did, but also in new ways. So this is the intranet as a thing in its own right. And we're going to explore what that might look like and what it might consist of. What we also see, though, and I think this is one of the most powerful concepts to have in mind and to take away from this talk, is that there is an incredibly important need to have an enterprise front door into the wider landscape. Because we've talked about the fact that new technology has been introduced into organisations, and all of you guys are bought into the idea of Office 365, as you should be. But we know that Microsoft makes changes now every week and launches a new product seemingly about every month. So that's fine, but Office 365 does not have a homepage. And maybe it shouldn't, because it is such a diverse set of tools. But for many common situations and common scenarios, our employees need an entry point, a front door, that is a jumping off point into the wider digital workplace, but also something that gives visibility to what is happening across this landscape, that shows what is happening within collaboration spaces, so that we're not hiding activities in locked rooms or buried in silos, but also visibility around processes, tasks and activities. Now, there's nuance to this. In many situations, that you're not actually going to end up with one enterprise front door. In fact, ask me later about how many enterprise front doors you might want within the organisation. But what I will say is this: the modern intranet plays one of those roles as one of those enterprise front doors. Now, I've said that intranet should meet a bunch of different needs within the organisation. Well, this is where we use a model called the 5 purposes of intranets. I've been using this for over a decade now. I'm a simple person. I know lots of people love amazing circular diagrams and interconnecting arrows and stuff. I like a list. A list works for me. I'm going to walk you through my list of the 5 purposes of intranets. I'm pretty confident that by the end of this list will work for you as well. So let's start at the beginning. Content. The intranet as the repository for stuff. So that might be corporate stuff, policies, procedures, guidelines. That might be mission and vision information. A lot of it is actually local stuff. So this is business unit content. This is around operational procedures, about customer support information, about IT details. And intranets are doing great at this. That is to say, they've been great at collecting stuff. Piles and piles and piles of stuff. But maybe not so great at delivering it in a way that actually keeps that content up to date and delivers it in a way that can be easily found and consumed by staff. And it's amazing, right, how big this can get. Now, Microsoft themselves are an early mover, and the field of information architecture actually originally was developed by Lou Rosenfeld when he went into Microsoft a lifetime ago, and they had millions of pages. And they're not alone. I gave a presentation at a group in Geneva a few years back of mostly UN folks, but a bunch of others, and they would, oh yeah, look, she's from Nestle. They've got 4 million pages. 4 million pages. Wow, that's great. And the lady in question went, no, that's not right. We don't have 4 million pages. And I'm like, oh, look, I'm sorry. Look, that's just what they told me. Don't mean anything by it. And she went, no, we don't have 4 million pages. We have 3.5 million pages. I mean, that's success, isn't it? I mean, that's something we should all aspire to. Or maybe not, right? And because content is just one of the purposes. And sitting alongside that is the intranet as the internal communications channel that ideally reaches all staff in a timely fashion. And this has been the other original traditional use of intranets, and this is homepage news. This is, the hero news story on the homepage. And hopefully this is also local and operational news. Now, this has always been a fragmented landscape, and the intranet as a news channel has always competed against, well, email mainly, but also meetings and face-to-face gatherings. And then increasingly in recent times, all of the collaboration platforms. And we now see an environment in which maybe most people are spending most of their time in teams. So what does that mean in terms of internal communications? Does that mean we ditch the intranet? Well, maybe not. I mean, if we have 50 or 100 or 500 teams and any given person is in 2 of them, 5 of them, then how do we ensure that actually they find out about the stuff that is relevant for everyone? Well, maybe that's where the intranet still plays a role. Now, in lockstep with other platforms in ways that certainly we are helping people work out, get some sense and shape around, and that's an evolving space. And certainly where the collaboration tools are helping and where the various products in the marketplace are helping. But okay, so if content and comms, the traditional role of the intranet, I'm going to add to that a third one, culture. So this is the intranet that celebrates the organisation and the people within it and the culture that has made the organisation what it is. It may also, and quite often, is about supporting culture change. And a lot of organisations are going through this kind of change. Now, someone's just unmuted. I just want to check whether someone wants to tell me anything. No, all good. Sadly, intranets of the past have actually largely had a negative impact on culture because they've been ugly, really, really ugly. And what message does an ugly intranet send to staff? Well, we don't care about the intranet. Actually, we don't care about staff. We care a lot about customers and look at our shiny sites and apps and delivery channels and all the branding and work that we do. We don't care about staff. Now, this has been one of the biggest innovations of the modern design in SharePoint, is that it's now impossible to create ugly sites. What I would say, though, is this, and what I've written about, is there is the danger that we can lose the heart of our organisation, the character and nature of our organisation, if we just take to SharePoint Modern in its plain vanilla, elegant but bland design. And so the question is, how do we introduce into that elements that reflect our organisation, its uniqueness and the strengths and culture of the staff within it? Now, the collaboration and social piece is a huge thing. It's obviously a massive part of platforms like Office 365. Here, this sits largely alongside the intranet within Office 365, but the intranet still plays a role. And that might be around giving me at a glance a list of here's the collaboration tools that I'm a member of. It might show me my recent documents. It might surface an activity stream that gives me visibility about what's happening across the various collaboration tools. And then the last purpose is activity. So this is the intranet as a place for doing stuff, not just reading stuff. And this means, look, okay, so we've delivered the intranet and it's got its form library, and in the form were all our electronic forms as PDFs, which we can easily find, we can download, print, fill in by hand, scan or post to someone who then types it in, who then rings me because I've forgotten a field. And this is where, again, Office 365 is transformational. So what is now called the Power Platform, all of those tools allows you to develop everything from forms through to forms with workflow, through to small and even large applications, allows us to replace things like forms as a PDF as maybe a form with a submit button, like the web and everything. Now, if that's the 5 purposes, you can then think about this as a set of sliders. And this says that maybe there is no one pattern across every organisation. Maybe not all organisations are as equally strong on each of these, and maybe they don't need to be. So maybe, for example, you are going down the highly collaborative route. You want to have a social organisation. You're putting collaboration, the social interaction at the forefront of everything. The culture is one of shifting to social, and this is working out loud and everything that goes with it. A little bit of comms, but that's largely replaced by collaboration, and content and activity is either happening elsewhere or isn't a priority. That's valid. Alternatively, you may be a hugely operational organisation. So maybe you run power stations. And so maybe there's a huge amount of content, which is the operational content, the operational ISO 9000 policies and procedures you follow when running that power station. And there is a lot of comms, but it's frontline comms. So this is the operational comms about changes in operating practice or updates in safety procedures. And activity is around giving access to the tools for monitoring and managing the huge bits of kit inside the power station, but maybe not culture or collaboration, because those things happen on the shop floor, as it were, person to person. Now, you can go a step further, and this is where I think it becomes really useful and where it is highly relevant to a discussion about the modern intranet within the context of Office 365, which is you can treat these not just as a set of sliders, but as a set of intentions that says maybe you can't push the dial on every one of these things at the same time, and maybe you can't push them all to 11. So then what are we focusing on? Where are we now, and what do we want to tackle now in the next year, for example? And we find this a tremendously useful model for organisations, for the clients that we work with, and heaps of folks that we've presented to around the globe, as a really simple way of getting stakeholders onto the one page. If you want to get more about that, look, there's a free white paper. It explains everything that I've talked about and a bit more. Grab that, download it, and make use of that within your organisation. Now, I said, though, that I was going to talk about 3 things, and I've talked a lot about the first, intranets. And I think that's okay, because the topic is putting intranets at the heart of your employee experience. But let me take a sip of water just to see whether you've got questions or comments before we talk about the next thing, which is the digital workplace. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, if somebody has questions from this part, because I think for me, I really like the wording enterprise front door.
Yes.
So I think it's, like like Slack, Trello, Monday, it's very like sexy, as you said, like in
Yep.
terms of like, so maybe like, I don't know, how do you perceive, like, does intranet has a lot of like history burden in a way, like it was just
Certainly.
stuff with, so I don't know, like a proper new branding maybe in the
Yeah, look,
world.
that's right.
And
Yeah.
another, like you talked about the roles in the previous slides. Do a lot of companies actually communicate these to the staff? Like, what is the role of our intranet? Like what do we expect you to use it for? Like, it's just like intranet, but like communicating the purpose as well.
Yeah, look, let me comment on both those things at once. So, look, I do think things like enterprise front door is a useful concept, and sometimes people use it instead of using the word intranet, and I'm fine with that. As you say, intranet as a word has a lot of baggage, and look, you can use other similar words, right? So it might be a window into your organisation, which is what I've heard people use. Although to my mind, as a metaphor, I'm more comfortable walking through a door than I am climbing in through a window. I feel a bit like a burglar if I'm climbing in through a window, but hey, if window works for you, then use that. And you can communicate terms like that out to the wider organisation. Would you then talk to them in terms of the 5 purposes? No, not directly, but would you explain in plain language what the intranet is for compared to other things? Yeah, absolutely. So you would talk about, come here for this type of communication, go this other place for this other type of collaboration. Because this is one of the really confusing things, is that we're so rarely turning anything off. We're just adding a lot of new stuff in. And so, life is short, right? People are not employed to make sense of technology. They're employed to get on with their jobs. And so they would like to know, could you just tell me what I'm supposed to be using for what? And I do think that is critical to communicate out to the organisation. And this is where we start to talk about this concept of digital workplace. And look, let me wave my hands around this. So a digital workplace consists of the sum total of different tools, platforms, and digital environments for work. Great. Now, I've waved my hands around that. And if I had you in a room, I would say to you, everyone, hands up who has a digital workplace. Try it now, just at home. I don't need to know the answer, but put your hand up if you think your organisation has a digital workplace. Now, let me cut to the chase. If your hand is not up, you're wrong. Sorry, I'm just going to come out and say it, because this is the reality. You all have a digital workplace. So you've had a digital workplace since the earliest version of Word and the most rudimentary version of email. So since the introduction of digital tools, we've all had digital workplaces. Now, our digital workplace is very different now than it was before, but it has the same problem, which is that it sucks. Because the reality is there's too many tools and a lot of them are incredibly hard to use, and we're incredibly confused about which ones we're supposed to be using and how they overlap or compete with each other. And so this is what we need to address. What I would say is then 2 things. First off, then, the digital workplace is not something you deliver. And Office 365 isn't the digital workplace, it's a tool, it's a platform within the digital workplace. And the second thing I'd say is, well, maybe if your current digital workplace sucks, then maybe we should be talking about what makes a great intranet. Yeah. And so this is actually about the attributes. The attributes of the digital workplace. And I might want to say that I want to deliver a digital workplace or improve the digital workplace so that it is seamless. It is simple, it's frictionless, it's productive for work. And this is all about how the pieces fit together, how they connect from one system to another, how ideally I'm able to work without having to know which system I'm in. Because staff don't understand systems, they don't want to understand systems, they're not going to understand systems. We've tried training them. Now, digital literacy is critical, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be dealing with that, but if we expect them to understand the back-end intricacies before they can get work done, we're doing it wrong. Now, as I said, there's quite a lot happening in Office 365. Now, I took this screenshot out of our instance, I don't know, a couple of months ago, so obviously already it's wrong. So a bunch of these things have already changed, and there's new things that have popped up. There's lists since I've done this, and I'm sure a few things. Kazala is already on the way out, I think. And so there is, 20 plus applications that we've delivered into the organisation. But thankfully, we have things like this, models like this that make it all simple. It's totally clear now. Well, actually, look, I mean, Kirsty's done a wonderful job with this diagram. I love it. And look, I know what SharePoint is and Yammer and Teams. This is good to do, although how that compares to lists, which is not on this, or Planner, which all do similar things. People are not quite sure what that is. OneNote I know, Excel and Word obviously. Sway, I've heard the cool kids use it, but I've never actually seen it. And so it goes. So maybe there is still quite a lot of complexity, but don't worry, this makes it all clear for sure. Now, again, don't get me wrong, I love these models because we absolutely have to make sense of all of this stuff. But there's a lot of work to be done around this. Now, I could talk for an hour just around how to think of Office 365 as a digital workplace, as a platform within it, how to make sense of it. But actually, I'm going to be focusing on intranets. So I'm going to pick out only two statements. So first is this one. Don't call your new intranet of a digital workplace because you'll paint yourself into a corner. Because then when you actually want to tackle the digital workplace, you've run out of names. So give your intranet a name, Bob, Bruce, or the intranet, but don't call it the digital workplace. And secondly, always remember that the tools that employees are using are mostly not Office 365. All us knowledge workers, we live within this platform, but the frontline workers, the operational staff, they're working within the call center systems, they're using Salesforce, they're working with the Oracle apps. So there is a whole landscape, and we need to be thinking about how we bring together that digital workplace beyond just Office 365. But okay, so now I'm in the home run, because now I'm going to start talking about digital employee experience. And this really comes from recognizing that employee experience consists of three things. There is a physical component, the office that you're within. There is a cultural component, how you work with each other, how you're onboarded, and there's the digital employee experience. And this maps, of course, to things like the customer experience. So we get customer experience. It is the sum total of interactions between an organisation and customers. We get it. Our organisations spend a lot of money on delivering a better customer experience. Well, what about employees? What about the other half of the equation? Well, now we start to say, well, maybe actually, what is the digital employee experience we give within the workplace and within the workforce, not just about what are the tools that we organisationally deliver to staff, but actually maybe how staff digitally work with each other, which could be as much as about how they chat and co-create in teams as it is about how we design the intranet front door. And this is a powerful concept, because this then starts to provide a view that really focuses on the experience, separate to and on top of the tools within the digital workplace. It also allows us to recognize this, which is you can't have a better customer experience than your employee experience. Now, we know this to be true. How do we know this to be true? Because you've called a bank. You've called a bank and you've got an answer, and then you've called them back the following day and you've got a different answer, and you can do that 3 or 4 times and get 3 or 4 different answers. Now, is that because the call center staff are stupid? No, far from it. It's because actually the call center staff are supported terribly internally with digital tools and information resources. I have been into, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 call centers over the last 20 years, and the digital support for call center workers is pitiful. And that's the limiting factor, because maybe if we delivered to them a great digital employee experience, then maybe they would be empowered to deliver the great customer experience that we want to do. And this is the equation, as it were, that can often bring this whole discussion up to the level of senior leaders. And when we go to put shape around this, and this is what we're doing, this is a new approach, by the way. This is a new concept. This is something that we've ended up spearheading at step 2, but is being taken up by folks around the world. And in our learning about how to put shape around this, we're seeing 3 things. We're seeing that you need a vision of the future, about where you're heading, what is the digital employee experience you want to deliver. There's a set of guiding principles that might be things like strive for simplicity. Gosh, it's easy to say, isn't it? Simplicity. But maybe if we're actually taking that as a real principle, maybe we do things differently than we're doing at the moment. And then we're going to need a series of DEXA initiatives and projects that both deliver capabilities which are not being covered elsewhere, but often also fill the glue between the different tools, to join things together into that broader experience. And when we look at things like the DEX vision, we see that it is often best communicated in the form of stories. Let me give you an example. So this is Anna. Anna is a worker that provides support for disabled people out in the community. Anna works for one of our clients, and we got to know Anna quite a bit. And she's got a job that she is immensely passionate about. And she finds tremendously satisfying working with and making human bonds and connections with lovely people who have a range of disabilities out in the community. But Anna has some challenges. So Anna doesn't have access to the intranet. She does have a mobile phone, but it's her personal phone. And while she has set things up so that she can get work email, she doesn't have the ability to even apply for leave online. She can't get an online payslip. The policies and procedures that she needs, she printed when she was in at head office, and she stores in file folders in an ice cream crate in the boot of her car. And every day she has to manage her roster and manage her clients and her client needs, ringing the support officers that sit in behind this frontline workforce to get stuff done, because again, she doesn't have the digital tools she needs. Now, it's easy to make a connection with Anna, even if I tell you that Anna is a fake person, because Anna's a persona. Now, she does represent a real person and she is from one of our clients, but nonetheless, she is a fake person that represents the needs of this audience. And it allows us to bring into the boardroom, into the IT planning session, into the UX design process, a deeper understanding of how she works and what she needs. And this tool's been around for a long time. This is not new, but again, we've tended to use it for customers and maybe not so much for employees. And when we start to look at employees and the use of narrative, we can also do things like telling a day in the life. So this is Diane. A hint, she's also fake, But again, she represents a real client and work that we've done in one of the public hospitals in Sydney. And this is her day in a life of being a nursing unit manager, which is a team leader for nurses within a particular branch of the hospital. And it starts from when she gets up in the day and when she's traveling to work. It looks at how she is checking on things, how she is managing her team and the tools that she uses. It works through how she is managing activities hour to hour and ultimately out to when she is heading home in a day. And when you write these day in the life stories, and we've actually written a bunch recently, it really shows, first off, that, my goodness, they do a fascinating but challenging job. And again, my goodness, there are a lot of issues. And so the current day in the life story really brings life to what we should be doing better in delivering a coherent digital employee experience for staff. We can also do future day in the lives. And in fact, we did just recently, the last couple of weeks, I wrote a future week in the life of an auditor. Because it turns out that auditors, while lovely people, spend most of their day looking at spreadsheets. And actually not a lot of spreadsheet work happens in a day because it's a very details-oriented thing. So actually we looked at a week in the life so that we could encompass things like those auditors were often working out on client sites and they felt isolated. That at the head office, there'd been an office refit. They had created a new physical workplace that was amazing, that was human-centered, that was flexible, that was a delightful place to work for the people who were in it, but lots of people weren't. And so because they weren't in the same physical space, we need to be thinking digitally about how we don't just communicate with these staff and don't just communicate and collaborate with these staff, but how we actually help them to feel part of a common culture. And by writing a future week in the life in a handful of pages, you can stitch together all of those elements together. And so, as I said, this is a new space. I'm doing a lot of writing. Others are doing a good writing around this. This is one of the publications that we're producing at the moment. So this is a leader's guide to DEX. Now you'll find it on Medium in the link. There's regular posts on here, and these are targeted not at us, assuming that you are not a CEO on this call, but on senior leaders. So the most recent one is about the role of the CHRO, the Chief Human Resources Officer, and this is about making the case to them so that we get the support we need to make these things happen. Now, time is passing. That's okay. Because now I really want to say, well, how does all this fit together? Well, so maybe here the intranet is a thing. It's a thing. We're going to deliver it now in SharePoint Modern. We need tools like Valo and others to deliver it well. And we want to be delivering a great intranet. But the intranet is just one of multiple tools within the digital workplace. And then when it comes to digital employee experience, this is the human's view. This is the human, the person looking at the screen. This is their perspective. This is their experience of how these things come together. And this is the powerful idea that stitches these three things together. Now, I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm then going to show you a couple of examples, and then I'm going to wrap things up into the final straight. Okay. Now, look, I do want to say, as I said, the pitch for this session is intranets at the heart of the digital employee experience. And this is where we've seen a lot of great intranets. And as Sue Hanley mentioned in her session, hopefully you saw it, she is one of our judges of the Step 2 Intranet and Digital Workplace Awards, which have been running for 14 years. And they've surfaced all sorts of really interesting approaches, and they show the diversity of intranets that are delivered. So sticking just with Office 365 and SharePoint Modern as the platform, we can see that there's very different focuses from BHP this mix of news at the top, notifications and social interactions in the middle, media and engagement at the bottom, modern, clean design. I mean, I think, really lovely looking intranet, long homepage, mix of functionality. If we look at something like Duke Energy, which is one of the largest energy producers in the US. So industrial company, a long track record of actually being innovators with a really strong culture. This is their homepage. Again, still in SharePoint Modern, looking immediately very different. And what you actually see in this is the middle of the homepage. The middle of the homepage that talks about employee connections. This is giving people high five recognition, service milestones, people coming and going, and then the rest of the news and the events. Now, this is a homepage that devotes maybe a quarter of the whole pixels to this, to celebrating staff. Now, maybe you wouldn't go that far, but it shows that maybe there are elements of this you could take so that you're doing more than the basic stuff. And this, of course, that feature that was presented, that's delivered using, well, SharePoint list and SharePoint form and some CSS, right? This is simple stuff technically. There is complex stuff. Now, so this is Wells Fargo. This is a winner a couple of years ago. This is their highly integrated intranet. So this is the homepage, and the top right-hand corner is items that need notification that show what people need to be doing right now. Alongside all of the news, this news is targeted depending on where you sit within the organisation and the role that you play. And when you dig into this, you discover that what they have implemented behind the scenes is a microservices architecture that allows them to have notifications surfaced from SAP, from Oracle, from line of business applications directly into the intranet, so that if there is tasks for someone to do, there's things that action is required for, they are listed here. And if that once they're done, they vanish from here. This is not news. This is what we would call a universal task list or a universal to-do. This is incredibly powerful and probably the single strongest example of the intranet as an enterprise front door. And then beyond the homepage. So this is Cox. This is one of the broadband providers in the US. This is their HR landing page. And I will highlight to you all of the numbers and tools that are surfaced inside this page, showing how much leave I have at the moment, allowing me to calculate future leave that shows my payslip details straight away and my career framework. And then here within Australia, Brisbane Catholic Education. This is their HR landing page. This is their Me page, created, inspired by what was originally done by Telstra. This is a new experience on top of existing tools. This is not rewriting the HR system. This is the intranet providing a better, dramatically better experience delivered using SharePoint online. Now, in the interest of time, what would I want you to take away from this? Well, there's a few things. So first off, I want to say this. I want to highlight the 2020 winners. We know who they are. They know who they are. You will know who they are in a couple of weeks. So watch this space. We're going to announce the winners. The next report's going to come out. You'll see a bunch of webinars from us coming around that. So exciting times in the calendar for intranet and digital workplace teams. But taking this away, I think there's a couple of practical things you can do. The first up is this: have a strategy. Doesn't have to be fancy. Write it on a napkin, have it as 2 pages of bullet points. Use the 5 purposes model to help put shape around what do you want the intranet to do, not in 10 years, too far, next month, too close, but maybe in the next year. In practice, move quickly to establish an enterprise front door before the fragmentation and confusion gets even greater because of all the tools within Office 365. This will benefit the intranet, but it will also benefit Office 365 because it gives a clear channel to conduct the change management and communication activities needed to help organisations and individuals transform themselves into new working practices. You do need to have a strategic view about where the digital workplace fits together and how it needs to work in order to be productive, certainly within Office 365, and that's a great place to start, but ultimately beyond that. And this is about delivering a digital workplace that is delightful, that is great, not just okay, certainly not kind of crap. And ultimately recognize that this concept of digital employee experience, this is the concept we are finding that gets engagement at senior leader levels. Senior leaders do not care about intranets. Sad, makes me cry a little on the inside. They don't care about Office 365 either, which is maybe sad for you as well, but they do care about employee experience. And so this is where we put this at the heart of things, we can find new ways to engage with senior leaders. And on that note, I'm going to say two things: dream big, deliver often, and thank you. I'm going to jump out of presentation mode so that in the remaining minute or so, people can jump in with the questions.
Yes. Does anybody has a question? You can open your camera and mic, or just type it in the chat.
Joanna, I think
Yes?
you've got a question. Jump on. Oh, that's you. You have raised your hand. Sorry. Yes. Simon Thompson would like to see more microservices intranets. Yes, yes, so would we. There are a few, but would love to see a lot more of them for sure. Questions?
Yeah, so thank you so much, James. If there isn't any questions, I think everybody can reach you in socials and Twitter. Yes. If there was other questions. And thank you everybody for joining. Please remember, all these recordings will be available for you, so you can share with colleagues or look at the session one more time as well. And next we will have happy hour. So there will be a lot of fun.
Cheers.
yeah, and surprises. We have juggler quiz and some mocktails. And I wanna in Finnish it's hölkyn kölkyn. So usually it's not only coffee. Now it's only coffee, but for Fridays we say hölkyn kölkyn in Finland. So
hölkyn kölkyn, yes, great.
So I hope everybody has a nice weekend and enjoy the happy hour. It will start in 1 minute. So grab a quick Friday drink. Thank you from my part as well. Bye.